Welcome to the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-hosts, Dr. Steve Jeffs and Erwin de Grave. Each episode, we bring you expert guests and transformative coaching insights. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-host, Dr. Steve Jeffs, and myself, Erwin de Grave. And today we have a pleasure to talk to Anita Kishore. How are you doing, Anita?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and welcome, Steve, as well. So, Anita, you probably know you've been listening to podcasts as well that we've been doing, so you know yourself much better than we do. So who is Anita, what she's doing right now, and how did she get in coaching?
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a longtime listener, first-time speaker, so thank you for having me today. I'm an executive coach for analytically minded people. That means the overthinkers, the folks who suffer analysis paralysis. And I tend to work with analytical executives who want to lean into some of their emotional energy to be more inspirational leaders. People who can lead with both inspiration and intellect, head and heart.
Mm.
So that's, I guess, what I do. I don't remember if there was a second question in there.
Well, how did you get in coaching? That's always interesting to know.
Yeah, for sure. Like most people, I didn't start off born as a coach. I wonder if there are any of those, perhaps. But I'm a scientist by training. So, bachelor's, master's, PhD in chemistry. And I've had multiple careers, research scientist, pharmaceutical executive, management consultant, global health. But the thread that pulled all of those together is I love people. And I'm perhaps a bit an introverted, analytical type by nature, but I genuinely love people and connecting with people. So that's been the theme throughout my career. And all of these I've had multiple career transitions, as I just shared, and I think they're the things that have propelled me from one career to the next were really my values. So, as I was born and brought up in the U.S., I live in Jackson Heights, New York, which is one of the most diverse places in the world. In my neighborhood, there are probably about 10,000 people on one city block. Where I grew up in rural Kansas, there are about 10,000 people in maybe a distance of 10 square miles. It's a little different, but I remember my parents are immigrants from India. I remember my first trip to India and nose pressed up against the window. I'm this 4-year-old kid, and I look out and I see little girls for the first time who look just like me, but they're naked, they're in their mother's arms, they're begging for money at the traffic light, and I didn't understand. It just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't have the words for politics and justice. I just thought, oh, maybe they're sick, maybe they need some help. And that really affected me. So I thought, following my physician and parents, grandparents, I thought maybe I'd also become a physician. So I made this little decision, big decision, and then I get to college and I find that sometimes pre-meds take the definition of collaboration on problem sets a little too far. So I was a little turned off by pre-meds, but I really liked the people. So the graduate students, the faculty. So I ended up pursuing a path in academia, got the PhD, but very quickly realized that I was not meant for the academy, but I wanted to do something more practical, have results on a real-time basis. And then right after the PhD, that set me on a path toward business leadership, but being able to connect the business and the science, and eventually the people.
Great. So when was the moment that you said coaching is something for me? So you've been in the medical and everything, and then you made that shift. What was the thing that triggered that for you?
Yeah, there were two moments. One, when I was a management consultant, I saw that senior partners would not only share technical advice and charts and graphs with their senior client contacts, but they also served as trusted advisors. And they acted as coaches to some extent. So, coaching not only on the technical or the work product, but also maybe the behavioral and the leadership side. So, that was just an eye-opening prospect. And then I was very lucky when I was in my first job in pharmaceuticals in Sandoz. And I was working in Germany. I was on a Sandoz International, so based in the global headquarters. I was lucky enough to have an executive coach, and that was magic to me. It felt like sorcery. So I think having the benefit of a coach opens your eyes to how one could work with a coach, what are some possibilities. I think firsthand experience is terrific.
Mhm.
Fascinating. So coming from, relatively hard science of chemistry, I don't want to get into the academic positioning of different different subjects. Um, into the space of humanity and people, there's a lot of coaches, a lot of leaders that actually see them as completely different fields. No, we've got science, we've got numbers, we've got the thinking, we've got all of this fuzzy, fluffy stuff, and pick one, but pick the right one, which is the hard science that a lot of us kind of look at. What do you feel is important for people, whether it's coaches, scientists, or business leaders, to know about the synergy of both of those sides coming together?
Wow, what a beautiful question. I've never heard it like that. I'd say there are a few ways to think about this answer. I think one is a little personal, just to me and my experience, and the other is thinking about how decisions are made. So the personal side is I went to Yale University. It's a beautiful place. I just happened to be there very recently. And one of the things I also serve on the board of an alumni organization called the Yale Science and Engineering Association. And we get together and talk with alumni about not not just back in my day and the good old days, but we also, which is fun, but we also talk about how can we support, our mission is to support current students and faculty. And so we stay connected to what's happening in the present times. But I think the thread that connects both the past, the present, and the future in this institution is that scientists and engineers are also people too. It's a liberal arts university that has science and engineering, premier science and engineering. And I think when you're there, you really feel that spirit. It becomes a part of you. You are not just a science. You are not just a humanitarian, although maybe the humanitarians spend less time up on the hill. So I think there is this sense that, we're people and we're part of a community. So that's the personal side where I think I saw that very closely, and I saw it from people who I really respected. So that was an important marker for me. And then I think the other aspect is um, let me just come. I'm thinking about the second part of your question. Um,
Bringing together the really the analytical and that emotional human thing, bringing together. How does that fit together?
yeah, I think and that's where. Thank you for that reminder. At the end of the day, you're coaching a person, and this is how decisions are taken. And I forget which Supreme Court justice said, that most decisions are actually emotional decisions. Like 90% of the decisions that are taken in the US Supreme Court are emotional decisions. And as an analytical person, the first time I heard that, I was shocked, maybe horrified, but You also there's also research that shows that in when the part of the brain that is disturbed or disrupted or even removed in the case of severe brain injury, the that's responsible for emotions, when that is no longer active or present, the ability to take decisions is then gone. So what you're hearing me say is all these analytical reasons, right? I've had to justify. But you also think about when you sit down with someone and you're trying to convince them to take a decision or move a different way, all the charts in the world aren't going to matter unless you can actually connect with that person. And so this is where I've learned this, but I've also felt this. I've also been coached around this. And I also think that when you're having a conversation, when I am coaching others on this, sometimes you just have to step away from the charts and just ask, well, what are you really feeling right now? And that's not always an easy question for an analytical person. And sometimes analytical people say, you know. So there are ways to ease into that. You can start with the thinking and then move into the feeling and then help them connect the two.
Interesting. What I've learned about decisions, and certainly more on a marketing level, that people first really make any decision emotionally, but then justify rationally. And certainly what you do with your analytical, and so help analytical leaders with that emotional intelligence, they more make decisions on an analytical basis because they just see the numbers or whatever what it justifies what it goes. So bringing those two together for executives is one, I think, very challenging for them to bring that emotional part of it because for that is, but how do you find, how do you get that balance, that it's the right balance for them? Because an emotional person bringing in the analytical is like, is the reverse. So what is the right balance to have for any person to have the analytical part and that emotional part?
I mean, what a great question. If we could be balanced, I think we could solve the world. Um, and I think it is tricky.
Mhm.
So ultimately, we have to take our own decisions around this. The analytical person in me, as you were asking that question, was, oh, well, there's a pro-con sheet, right? And and I've made things like this. So when I made the decision to leave Bain and go to my next step, I made a decision matrix in Excel, and I had all kinds of I had two options. Do I leave Bain? Do I go to a different office in Bain? Maybe I had three options, or do I there was geography involved, etc. So I put all these factors down, and then I put in weights and percentages. And I have friends who do things like this, senior executives who make decisions like this. But that's a tool. That's one step in the process. And I've never met anybody who uses that tool as the sole basis for their decision making. It's really almost like note taking. It's a way of getting your thoughts out of your mind and then onto the page. Sure, it's kind of fun to play around with percentages and weights in Excel. And then the tool spits out an answer. And then you have to step back and say, oh, I don't like what the tool says, right? It's the same way even with AI or with some kind of assessment, any kind of assessment. You have to pause and say, well, is this true? Is this right? And that's where we as humans then get to decide, well, some of this is true, but fortunately, we have agency to be able to say, I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to leave some of this aside. So I think in the coaching part, it's coaching your client to be able to trust in their own decision. Sure, it's walking them through the analytical part. Well, what might happen? What are the risks? What are the possibilities? And then there is what might it be like? The fun, creative, imaginative side.
But I can definitely picture clients that have done that analytical decision-making process. It spits out the wrong answer, so they go back and tweak the process so that they can get the right answer. Interestingly, I see that as a lot about trust and those parts that we trust. If I trust the analytical, then I have to kind of create strategies to kind of work through that. You spoke about balanced before. It kind of came out from Erwin's question. When we're looking at sort of intellectual and inspirational, I think was how you introduced it earlier. What does balance actually mean in your experience?
When you said that, I was thinking about when I was in elementary school. It wasn't a pogo stick, but we had these space age balls. It was like Saturn. It was a ball on top and a ball on the bottom and a disc in the middle. And you had to stand, pogo balls maybe, and you stand on that and you had to try and balance. And then if you could sustain your balance, then you could jump. And I'm imagining myself like woo, teeter-tottering right now on this ball, and I'm noticing that I'm tightening my abs as I'm even imagining this. So, and I say that intentionally because as someone who comes from pretty analytical background, I historically haven't always allowed myself to narrate, right? So to share with you what's going on in my head, as a way to stay grounded, to stay present. And so that's one of the things that I try to help my clients do. A very tangible tactic, as an example. Let's say you're in a meeting and so you're bored, you're tired, you're frustrated, whatever it is, you are not having it, and you're getting irritated, whether it's with that person, whether it's with the format of the meeting, and you're not able to pay attention to what is being said. I encourage my clients on whatever thing it is they're taking notes. On the left-hand side or in a comment if you're taking digital notes, narrate a couple of sentences. What are you feeling about yourself in this moment? I am really irritated. I can't believe this person is saying this right now. And what I find, it comes back to a bit of the sense of self in coaching. So just being aware of, oh, I am losing my focus right now by putting it down on paper or digitally. I can just narrate what's going on, and then it allows me to come back to paying attention to what the other person is saying. It's like, again, getting it out of one's head, putting it down, and then coming back and being present. So that's one way in which I envision that one can come back into balance.
Fascinating. I'm wonderfully surprised by that answer. That didn't go anywhere that I was expecting it to.
Me either.
Tell more, Steve. Where do you think it was going?
Well, let me come back to that question in a second, because there are some things, Anita, that you said that I wanted to highlight. I guess because they felt really important to try and use emotional language there. One was the metaphor. And I love the richness that metaphors bring to coaching conversations. A picture says 1,000 words. And so if we can explore what's going on through a picture, well, then all sorts of different things become possible. But actually, there's sort of pogo ball, and the wisdom that I took that you articulated was that balance is about coming back to self. It's coming back to core. It's a reconnection with who we are. It's not an external measurement of, or even like my hands are doing, the seesaw or teeter-totter of equality and the same volumeness. No, it's about coming back to core, which I think is really important, because to me it's a yes and. How can we be intellectual and inspirational? What is it? What is that synergy that emerges when we step into both? Not to dial one back to create room for the other and to be compromised in our expression of of both, which is how I see a lot of people sort of defining this. The other thing that stood out was that narrative component, which is what did I write? It's the scientist of self. Like we get to be the observer and sort of notice our own experience in the moment, which interestingly is also a metaphor of balance.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. Thank you. I think I Mark Brackett is someone who's really brilliant psychologist at Yale University. I heard him speak a few years ago, and I've been following his. He has a lovely podcast in which he interviews rock stars and lots of other cool individuals. But he also has a tool that I really like, and it's called How We Feel. And he co-designed the current version of the app with the head of Pinterest. And it's beautiful and it helps you track your emotions. And I started using it a few years ago, and I encourage my clients or folks when I teach a lot of analytical executives. I was teaching at the National Institutes of Health for many years, the Senior Executive Leadership Development Program, and I would just share this as a tool because while it's not true that all scientists are one way or not one way. I think just like everyone, scientists, some come in the flavors of being extremely emotionally intelligent, and there are some who could use some development of their emotional intelligence. So I just share that tool with folks as a way to say, can you get more in touch with your emotional vocabulary? And as a corporate executive, I felt like there were only maybe three emotions that I was allowed to express verbally. I could be happy, I could be disappointed, and I could be frustrated. And as you all know, of course, the emotions wheel, various charts, using the tool How We Feel, it helps think about the emotional intensity and I know the words positive and negative may not sit well with coaches, but it gives you a color code and then just an expanded vocabulary. And so I like that it gives more words. And then in with the executives with whom I work, I think it also not just gives them expanded vocabulary, but when if and when they start to feel more comfortable expressing for themselves, whether that's in the app or in their note taking or with me, the risk that I experiment, that I encourage them to take is what would it feel like to share what's going on for you with your team? And when they're able to do that, if and when they're able to do that, it gives the team then permission, right, to be able to say, oh, number one, oh, this person has some feelings. And it's not just the three corporate approved feelings. And then it starts to give them permission to be able to express and share.
Any
What
question? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, what training wants to be done with the team or the recipients of an expression of emotion? Where the question comes from is oftentimes when I see emotion expressed, I see a rescuer helper mode going, let me fix it, let me solve it. Now I could just be making that up, or maybe that's just me. But that's the curiosity to not just create the self-safety to express, but also the environmental or team safety to receive, to witness, or to be present to that expression.
That's such a great point. How, because this, for some folks, expressing emotions is not a safe thing, whether it could be for a variety of reasons. So there, you're right that there does need to be some training or coaching to do that. And what I was just illustrating was using an example, the leader as example, as the training, but there may be additional opportunities. Um, I'm certified, for example, in EQI, the emotional quotient, EQI 2.0 training. There are others around this, but not everybody gets the opportunity to have an assessment on this. So you're right. I think that's actually an interesting area to consider for team coaching or training or upskilling, I suppose, on how to discuss emotions productively in a team setting. It's a great thing to be thinking about.
About emotions, something that when you were saying like you only allowed to have three emotions in your professional environment, and that comes from the past many happened, and I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that they didn't know how to manage more emotions. It's like they were more like analytical and don't come with a fourth emotion because I don't know what to do. Is that correct, or is that a wrong analysis from my end?
Well, funny you say that. I don't, so from a research point of view, I'm not sure. My analytical answer, coming back to my safety here. But what I can tell you is I have certainly had that experience, and that's what led me away from the analytical work around being a pharmaceutical and global health executive into coaching. And one of my biggest frustrations, sure, I was frustrated by motives like profit over people. When I worked in a big pharmaceutical company, I was frustrated by having to promote more full-priced Viagra when discounted products were available. But really, the hardest thing for me was to be able to productively express my own frustration at work. And I didn't know how to do that. And that led to some challenges. It led to me not being able to express disagreement well with previous managers. It led to, yeah. And then you get stuck. And so I think while it wasn't obvious for me at that time, I think if I were to go back into some of these roles, I might have been able to show up differently. I know I would be able to show up differently if I could express more calmly or or even just with different language. This isn't working because of this, this, and this. How can we find a solution? Sometimes it just comes to that simple SBI feedback, right? Situation, behavior, impact. If I had only known that long ago, I could have expressed frustration at work a lot more productively.
That's the transformation that a lot of businesses are needing to do, are doing, but still a lot have to make that transfer from purely, not pure, but mainly an analytical to more that emotional human kind of factor. And you see this more and more with young companies. You see this really go and focus on the people and less on where the older industries are more like, yeah, we have those things going on. So, and I have another question, and I don't know if that's going to be a challenging question, but what happens to an analytical person if it needs to make a decision but doesn't have any analytical evidence to make a decision?
It's probably one of the top three questions or areas that my clients come to me with for support on. And, how do you make a decision in the absence of information or when there's scant information? So, and often these leaders are being asked to make decisions very quickly.
Oh.
So that is, there's no easy answer to this. I think Steve mentioned earlier picking up on that theme of trust. And I think the other thing is also as a leader, you're going to get some things right and you're not going to get everything right. And that can be terrifying, but it's having that trust in one's skill, experience, gravitas to be able to say, I'm going to do my best to get this right for right now with what information I have. That can be really tough, though. And an example being in the United States when during the time of COVID, when decisions were taken to restrict um, to restrict travel or to restrict just various impositions across the world, really. But subsequently there have been individuals, organizations, leaders who've said that this was the wrong decision. And the hard thing about making decisions is you take decisions based on the best information you have at that time. And sometimes we have to revise our decisions. And sometimes people are unforgiving because they say, well, the science said this, the scientists said this. And at the end of the day, scientists are also people making decisions on best information that's out there. So there are risks. And so getting comfortable with taking risks, I think that's part and parcel of being an executive.
Yeah, it's a rich answer. And as you said before, to do that from that holistic, core connected place. One thing that struck me as you asked one of your previous questions, Erwin, is dismissing emotion doesn't make us more analytical. And so, in the face of uncertainty, I think there's great wisdom in noticing what's our analytical, logical information, and also what's our emotional or intuitive information. And from that broadened awareness, now, how do we move? How do we move forward?
And, emotions are data. I think that's what you just said. So that can be satisfying to some.
Absolutely. And of course, just for leaders, that the question that Erwin asked about, making decisions in the absence of information is also really true for our teams. And how we respond when they're making decisions influences how they make the next one. So are we creating safety for them to trust themselves? Do we have their back? Are we willing to partner with them as we revise things as we go forwards, rather than judge and poke fingers on what did happen? One question comes to my mind sort of as we come towards the end of our time today is what's next? Like, we've spent a bit of time sort of looking back and reflecting, and then what's the wisdom from that? But when you look in the space of coaching, of inspiration and intelligence in business, and what's catching your attention as you're looking forwards?
I wish I had a crystal ball. Sometimes, not always, actually. Yeah, I think the obvious answer is AI. How will AI support and or disrupt not just coaching, but clients and executives in organizations? I think there's I encourage my clients to meet the moment, right? Use AI when they need spot answers, role-playing assistance. I'm not someone who believes that AI is going to take away all our jobs, but I do think it's going to change how we do our jobs. So there's AI. I think there is probably, though, still, as I lean into my analytical side, there's probably still more research. I think I'm not sure that the assessments that are out there right now around emotional intelligence are even correlated to actual emotional intelligence. There's some question around that. Look, it's you don't need the perfect tool to be able to discuss this, but is there a world in which we are able to, in a work environment, in a professional environment, be able to discuss emotions in a way that feels safe, where we have psychological safety, and can still be rigorous to bring the intellect side. Gosh, I wish I knew what that work is or what it looks like, but I think there's still work to be done there.
What a vision. That's exciting, and I love that you sort of spoke to both sides of that, the relational safety, the intellectual rigor, and actually the rigor both with analytical side, but also with the emotional side, that there's not an overuse of either. And that this is definitely a place of uncertainty where we do need to reconnect back to core and work it out as we go along. We've got to walk that path. And I think that's a great reminder for all of us. You reference role models, both as an influence of your journey, but also the power that we have as humans to influence those around us just by first influencing ourselves. Thank you very much for your time this morning. I got multiple pages of notes here, and I've really enjoyed the surprises that you've inspired in me, at least during this conversation.
So, Anita, thank you. But how, if people want to learn more what you're doing and what you're doing, where can people find you?
Sure. I'm online. My website is www.anitakishore.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as Coach Anita, PhD.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing and making our brains somehow going, oh, this is interesting rabbit hole to go into, and it's another thing to think about it. And certainly what I came back to is basically that coming back on those two balls you had and standing up, that balance. And certainly nowadays, with everything happening, that balance for yourself, as you said, Steve, as well, that have that looking for that balance, because that is going to give you the strength, the confidence, and the trust to be able to handle everything around you. And that's insightful. So thank you for that. Everybody else, thank you very much for listening in. And until the next episode, take care. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Coaching Edge. Until next time, keep coaching and keep growing.